Good Saturday morning, everybody, and welcome into the Auburn pregame show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. I'm Simone Eli alongside Matt Scalisi. Already week 7 of the college football season, and Auburn is just less than 2 hours away now from kickoff in Fayetteville. The Tigers visiting 17th ranked Arkansas, kind of a revamped Arkansas team, one that I think some folks are a little surprised by this season. They are coming off a loss against Ole Miss, but give credit to where credit's due, Matt. What Sam Pittman has been able to do with Arkansas, a team that hardly was, moving along in the SEC just a couple of years ago, seems to be rocking and rolling a little bit for the Hogs.
I think the fact that we're even having any anticipation about this game at all says a lot about how far Arkansas has come, because I know that Auburn fans are certainly aware of it because Chad Morris is a name they're familiar with. And the program at the time he was there, and it wasn't just about him. It had been on its way to the bottom of the SEC for a long time, but they were so bad. They just weren't competitive. There's a difference, I think, between you can be a half decent team in the SEC and still lose most of your games because it's such a tough league. But Arkansas wasn't even competitive for a few years there. And they, I think we saw when they went up against Georgia that they're not at that elite level. They're certainly not ready to compete at the top end of the SEC right now, but they are absolutely in the mix of that group of teams in the middle here where they're good enough to give most of the teams in the league a run for their money. And we saw they took Ole Miss to the absolute wire last week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So obviously Arkansas is the favorite at home right now. They're coming up into 11 o'clock kickoff on CBS. They are the favorite over Auburn. Auburn has won the last 5 straight against Arkansas. The last game was one of the closest matchups of any of them. Auburn coming off the loss against Georgia, a game where it felt like early on, Matt, there was a little bit of momentum for the Tigers on the Plains. And then, of course, Georgia kind of took over in the way that Georgia has taken over, of course, wins the game. What do you think the biggest thing is that we learned about this Tigers team at this point in the season after that loss to Georgia?
I think it's mostly been pretty positive. Positive is maybe not the word, but it's been a productive week in terms of the attitude and the mindset that we've seen out of Auburn players and out of Brian Harsin. You do want to see some amount of encouragement. You want to see some belief that the team can still accomplish good things and can get better. Mm-hmm. I don't know that even if Auburn had played its best version of itself, I don't know that they could have beaten Georgia last week. But Auburn can play a lot better than they did last week. And I think that they showed early in that game that they really can be very competitive with elite teams on both sides of the ball. The issue, as a lot of folks are pointing out here this morning, is they're missing opportunities. They're giving away opportunities to score, to keep themselves in games early with these dropped passes. And I think it'd be very simple to boil it down to the receivers just need to be better with their hands. But it's a little bit more than that. I think the plays are breaking down a little bit. It comes down to offensive line. It comes down to the decisions the quarterback is making. And a little bit comes down to Mike Bobo and the plays that are called to try and take advantage of the strengths of this team. Absolutely. So everything needs to come together a little bit better. But I think we're seeing that there are opportunities there for this offense to score more. And I think that will really help the defense late in games when we've started to see them break down. That's sort of naturally going to happen when you've been, with your back against the wall for the entire game.
No question. I think that part of these drop passes that we're seeing throughout the comments here, there's so much pressure on the passing game when Auburn has to be one-dimensional and they can't run the ball. Auburn has been successful this season when they have been able to run the ball. And it has 3 great backs in Sean Shivers, Tank Bigsby, and Jarquez Hunter. And when those guys are utilized in the right way, when the offensive line is able to be productive and get a push up front, Auburn is very, very hard to stop. Sam Pittman said this week that when they're able to get the type of protection they need up front, it's really hard to stop these guys beyond, before 3 or 4 yard gain, which is or 4 or 5 yard gain, which is important in the SEC. Those type of gains in the SEC are huge. They're not necessarily big plays, but that's what sets up big plays. Brian Harsin knows that. He was asked about this week about the run game, how important it is to establish the run, and he was a little matter of fact, if you will, when it comes to answering some of these questions that we're going to have for you today on the pregame show. Here's the one.
Every single week we've been trying to do that. Yeah, we haven't waited, for the Arkansas week. That wasn't a preseason plan. We've been trying to do that every single week. That's something that I think, most teams want to do. They want to establish the run. We'd like to do that. We'd like to run the football. We got to be balanced though. So we still got to be able to throw it and do things on the perimeter. But it's not just Tank. It's everybody. Everybody on the offensive side of the ball that has to be able to do that. O-line, tight ends, wide receivers, running backs. Everybody's got a piece of the pie when it comes to the run game.
So establishing the run is a team effort, made very clear by Brian Harsin there. I think that's an obvious thing. I think that from the fans' perspective, from the media's perspective, from folks outside of maybe the inner workings of the football team, you're able to look at a guy and go, oh my God, why didn't you cut back this way? Why didn't you do this? Well, it really is all 11 dudes on offense making the play work, especially in the run game. Auburn just 46 yards against Georgia. Now, give credit to Georgia. The Bulldogs defensive line, the Bulldogs defense in general ranks number 1 in the country, along with just like 5 points per game going into that Auburn game. So don't overlook the fact that they were playing the most talented defense in the country. Regardless, Auburn was unable to do it. 46 rushing yards was the worst, Matt, in 3 seasons by an Auburn team.
Yeah, and it's hard to know how much to put on a poor performance for Auburn versus they're going against what a lot of people right now believe to be one of the better defenses we've seen in the last 5, maybe 10 years in college football. So it's tough. It's been funny, Simone, that's kind of how Auburn's schedule has worked out so far. They've lost 2 games, but they were both to teams that at this point look like they are nationally elite teams.
Yeah.
And obviously we know that Auburn has also struggled against some teams that they're supposed to be better than. But I think today is interesting in a lot of ways because this might be a team where Auburn is sort of more evenly matched, right? I think that all of their games have been in one of those 2 categories. It's either been a nationally elite team or a team that Auburn should easily win against. Today might be a little bit more of a level playing field. And as far as that goes, it might be a good opportunity for us to learn more about just how good this team is. Playing against somebody with still, I would say, not the same overall roster talent level that Auburn has, but still is playing very well and is a rising program. So, this is going to be an interesting opportunity for us to see what kind of team Auburn is today. I want to throw real quickly though to one of our commenters real quick, Simone, who asked a question for you and me. Carrie Yang wants to know if we think Bo is looking over his shoulder at TJ Finley, unsure if he will lose his job to him. And, we saw last week that TJ Finley did come in at the end of the game. We don't know what the decision was behind that, if it was just a matter of getting him some reps, if Bo was banged up. But, the discussion of starting quarterback was all we were talking about a few weeks ago. And then it kind of was silenced at the end of that LSU game. And it hasn't really come back up. But I wonder if Bo struggles again in a game against somebody other than the number 1 team in the country. Does this become a conversation again at some point?
I think it's an ongoing conversation. Maybe not one that we're talking about, but one that is being thought about, one that's being discussed or has been discussed in the locker room between coaches and players. I think, TJ Finley wants to know where he stands. Do I have a shot at this job? Because you told me coming in when I transferred from LSU, you told me very clearly I had an opportunity to be the guy. And he's proven, at least in the Georgia State game, that he can get it done against the Georgia State team, I understand, but Auburn was struggling in that game. He kind of revives them, and Auburn wins the game. I don't know if Bo is looking over his shoulder. I don't know if he's that type of guy. That to me involves maybe he's playing scared or timid, or like he's gonna, if he slips up, he loses his job. But I think he is very aware. I think he is aware that there is another option, that he's not the only option, like there has been in years past, where he kind of has been the only option. I think that there's a situation where he knows that if necessary, Brian Harsin will pull the trigger and will go with a different guy who kind of can bring a different look, who will keep his eyes downfield a little bit more. And so I think that he is aware. I don't think he's playing timid. I'm not sure if he's looking over his shoulder. But TJ has proven, just like you see from this comment here, that he has a very strong arm. Bo has a strong arm. I mean, we've seen that guy throw rockets before. But when it comes to some decision making down the stretch, some things where you're like, oh, that's Bo doing Bo again. If Brian Harsin wants to get away from that, I think that Finley could be an answer at any point in the season. I think that the best way to put it is Bo Nix was put on notice, and he is well aware moving forward that there's another option.
For sure. I think that's a great point. I think it's having what happened early in the season will have an effect on Bo Nix, regardless of whether he ever ends up on the bench again.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, so guys, one of the biggest issues, I guess, not only was the run game, but some concerns offensively when it comes to the red zone offense. This is another thing that Brian Harsin was asked about, and again, was a little bit of like matter of fact, kind of like, yeah, duh, like this is what we've been trying to do. We want to get into the end zone. Let's listen in quick on what he had to say about getting 6 on the board and not just 3.
It's emphasized every week. There are no weeks. There have been 0 practices that we don't emphasize that. You finish drives to score touchdowns, period. That's what you do. And that's the challenge every time you get the football and you move the ball, and we can move the ball. There's opportunities for us to do that. You got to finish. You got to put the ball in the end zone. You got to score touchdowns. You got to have guys make plays in those situations. You got to have great plays.
So we've seen some situations at times in multiple games this season for Auburn where they are deep in the red zone. They seem to be knocking on the door and they can't punch it in. Matt, I'm not going to ask you what seems to be the issue, but what is the resolution, I guess, moving forward outside of simply saying, okay, guys need to make plays?
Well, I do think, and I hate to sound general again, but I do think red zone offense so often comes down to having a clear offensive identity. When you get a limited field and you have to make decisions about how are we going to finish this drive, I think a lot of times it comes down to what do we do best? Yeah. What can they just not stop us doing? And to be able to make that call, you have to know the answer to that yourself. You have to know what am I good at? What is my strength as a team? Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure that this Auburn team has quite figured it out yet offensively. I think they have had stretches of success. We saw early in the season, we thought, okay, this is a explosive ground team. This is a team that's built around some big playmaking, fast running backs. And that faded a little bit when they got into the meat of their schedule. So now we're left, I think, still wondering, what is the offensive identity of this team? And today, again, is going to be a great opportunity to figure it out because they're going up against a well-coached, hard-hitting, talented defense. And you're not going to be able to just rely on doing the 1 or 2 things that you feel most comfortable doing. You're going to have to mix it up, and you're going to have to also stay dedicated to keeping this Arkansas defense honest. You're going to have to keep running the ball sometimes, even when it's not going well, because you have to keep that Arkansas team from teeing off on Bo Nix. So, all of this is a roundabout way of saying, I don't know what the specific answer is for Auburn in the red zone, because I think in order to know that, they have to figure out what are their most effective tools as an offense. Yeah, no question. I think a big part of that has to do with decision making by Bo Nix. We've seen some major issues when it comes to misfiring, not firing, tucking and running, when something else is open. So that will be interesting to see. Let's look at the other side of the ball for Auburn, because one of the key matchups in this game is going to be this Tigers defense, which ranks 23rd in the country and 3rd in the SEC. It's kind of been like a little bit of a sleeper stat there, maybe one that folks hasn't really paid attention to much, but ranks 23rd in the country, their run defense, allowing just about 105 yards a game, Matt. And on the other side of that, Arkansas is putting up 244 on the ground. A big part of that, of course, is dual threat quarterback KJ Jefferson. So it's kind of like these two forces here. Yeah. I'm not trying to act like
Auburn's defense is like some dominant force, but hey, they've been steady, ranked third in the SEC in the run defense. That's pretty impressive in and of itself. Who has the advantage here? In my opinion, Arkansas at home. You have dual threat guy and KJ Jefferson. You have a couple backs who are impressive as well. I would give the edge to Arkansas at this point.
Well, I'll say this. I think I have concerns about Auburn's defense in the second half of this game. I think that they've shown that they can play with a lot of fire, a lot of energy up front defensively, and they did it against Georgia last week, and they were very disruptive to what has typically been a Georgia offense that can kind of do whatever it wants on the ground. They couldn't do it early last week against Auburn, and I think I think this Auburn front seven particularly can look really really disruptive, really aggressive, and that's going to be tough for Arkansas, I think, to get stuff going because they're not a super dynamic passing offense. Yeah. But as the game goes on, this Arkansas offense is very physical. There's a lot of big guys who don't mind taking some punishment early, and that's going to wear on you over the course of 4 quarters. So, I think it's really important for Auburn to take advantage early in this game of trying to make some things happen, make some big explosive plays, and get out ahead of Arkansas, because I have this feeling that later in this game, that Arkansas offense is going to start to lean on Auburn's defense a little bit, and it's going to be a lot harder to stop them in the 4th quarter than it's going to be in the 1st quarter, maybe. Yeah. So it's tough. I think it sounds like we all watched that heavyweight fight last week. We kind of knew that the challenger, we knew Wilder needed to get his big shots in early because it was going to be tough to last deeper into that fight against a big, chunky, massive champion. And not that Arkansas is the champs here, but I think that's a decent analogy for this game. I think you want to land your haymakers early if you're Auburn.
Yeah, when teams are able to wear you down over time in the SEC, that's where teams really start to pull away. It might not seem like some big dominating win necessarily, but then you get to the 4th quarter and they're up by 3 scores, and it's because they've been able to just wear you down. And one part of that for Arkansas's run game really has been 54 rushing plays of 10 or more yards and stopping the big play, which ranks 2nd nationally, by the way. Again, one of those stats that not a lot of folks pay attention to, but those are the plays that just kill you. When you get in a 3rd and long situation, or you feel like your defense is coming off the field and bam, there goes the Razorbacks for 10 plus yards on the ground. And those just wear on a defense, Matt. I mean, those are so frustrating plays. If Arkansas is able to string a few of those together today at home, get the crowd behind them, Auburn gets on their heels, that's not a good situation to be in defensively.
No, and I'll tell you one of the other really frustrating things about this Arkansas offense, if you haven't watched them much this year, some of those big runs that you're talking about have come from broken plays where KJ Jefferson is so good at, you guys that have watched Auburn all year are used to watching Bo get out of trouble in the backfield and scrambling around and juking and spinning and all this. KJ Jefferson looks a little bit different. The same results happen a lot, but there's a lot less wiggling around back there. He's just hard to bring down. He's just a big, brutal looking guy and doesn't mind, seeking out contact when he takes off running with the ball. So he can be a frustrating guy to play against. And like you said, you feel like you've got them where you want them on 3rd down, and your pass rush is getting to him in the backfield, and there he goes. He takes off running and gets the 1st down. That can be demoralizing and can lead to kind of an emotional letdown. So Auburn's got to, stay patient, understand that you've got playmakers too, and you've got the ability to score and do big things against this Arkansas defense early in this game, especially. I think you have to commit to a game plan, stick to it, and don't get frustrated. I think that's something that's really important, especially in a road environment that is going to be fired up for Auburn, by the way. I don't know that we've talked about it yet, Simone, but the Arkansas fan base, this game's kind of important to them. They're very angry about what happened in this game last year.
I'm trying to wait. Hold on. Now you got me. Now you got me trying to think about 2020. You have to refresh my brain. A lot has happened in the last year, Matt.
Well, I'll remind everybody who doesn't remember that this game a year ago ended with Bo Nix spiking the ball backwards, which
Lord, yes, God, yes,
should have been ruled a fumble by rule, but the officials blew the ball dead. It ended up being Auburn's ball still, and they kicked the field goal to win the game. Arkansas really feels like it should have been their win,
Lord, yes.
and they have harbored some resentment about it, and they're carrying it over into this game.
Forgive me, I don't know about anybody else, but it feels like that was like centuries ago.
It sure does. It's actually
you literally I remember a lot of games, but when you brought that up, I stopped dead in my tracks and I'm like, hold on a minute, what happened in that game a year ago? But no question, a frustrating one. I remember seeing Sam Pittman's face, and I was just like, "Dang, man, that was brutal, no question." We're only 7 weeks into the season, but it's so easy to look at the implications of every single game at this point, week by week, Matt. And there are really no gimmies for Auburn. There really are never any gimmies in the SEC, but there was a time when Arkansas was a gimme game. Okay, I think that Auburn fans, people in the SEC, maybe are not sold on this team. Right now, they're kind of viewing this game as, all right, this is one that should go in the win column. We got to move forward because you got Ole Miss, you got A&M. Obviously, Bama's still coming up. But this is one of those games that puts you more in the middle of the pack of the SEC West and not one of those bottom teams in the SEC West, Matt. How crucial is this when it comes to long-term program building, kind of where you stack up in about a month and a half when the regular season ends?
Well, it's really important, Simone, when you're building a program to, I think, in Auburn's case, establish yourself as one of the big whatever in the SEC West. They want to be thought of as one of the teams in the same category as Alabama in the West. And there's a little bit of a vacuum at the top right now. I don't think Alabama's going anywhere, but I think you look at what's happening in Baton Rouge right now. If we ever thought of Alabama and LSU as the big two in the SEC West and everybody else is kind of fighting for third, that's changing. There's a spot open next to Alabama right now in this division. And we don't know who's going to be the next program that can establish themselves as consistently competitive. And, I think there's reason to believe that LSU this year is going to look like this for at least another year or two. Yeah. I think you look at the rest of the league, Lane Kiffin's doing some nice things at Ole Miss. He has not yet established himself as a guy that is genuinely year in and year out competing with Alabama to win the division. Texas A&M just beat Alabama, but they already have 2 losses on the season. They're not a threat to win the SEC West even this year. Yeah. I think there's an opportunity right now in the SEC for somebody other than Alabama and Georgia to emerge and become a part of that discussion. And it starts by winning games like this. The way that you get considered a part of that group of teams is by winning the games you're supposed to win, beating the teams that are in the middle of the league and showing that you're not part of that pack. You are above that pack. You are a cut above the rest. And I don't know if Auburn is there yet. I think today is an important game to find that out. I think in the future, games like this, if you're an Auburn fan, you want games like today to be considered automatic. You want people to not even be worried about a game like this. Yeah. But we're not there yet. And I think showing that Auburn can consistently win games like this is very important to establishing themselves as part of that top echelon. And they've got to work their way in there. Today is a big opportunity to do that.
Yes, and Brian Harsin wants this win almost kind of like a career, not milestone, but an important part to his early success, winning over the fan base, saying, hey, yes, we are those teams that can put away teams that we're better than, that we recruit better than, that we're historically known to beat. So definitely important in that regard. Before we let you go looking around the SEC, Auburn, Arkansas is going to be the early one. There's a couple other early ones in the SEC as well. So get your coffee, get on the couch, go love on your dogs, get some bacon. That's what I want this morning is some bacon. We'll see if my husband can deliver on that here in a couple minutes. But Florida LSU in Baton Rouge, A&M against Missouri. Those are all 11 o'clock kicks. And then kind of the big one there, a 2:30 game on CBS is 11th ranked Kentucky taking on Georgia, both unbeaten. Matt, that's one that I'm definitely looking forward to today.
Kentucky, Georgia is interesting. At least it is until it kicks off. We'll see. We'll see if Kentucky can hang in there. I'm really interested by Ole Miss, Tennessee, and maybe I won't be for very long. But Tennessee has quietly been playing some really, really good offensive football, and they're going to have their work cut out for them today on the other side of the ball because they're going to have to actually get a stop or two against this Ole Miss team. But Tennessee, and I know Auburn folks aren't thinking about this very much because they're not on the schedule, but Tennessee's gone from being a laughing stock of the league to they've at least got one thing they're very good at. They're playing kind of the really what I think Auburn fans would recognize as kind of that early version of the Gus Malzahn offense. They're very fast paced. They're putting a lot of points up on the board right now. And, I'm curious to see how they look against Ole Miss today.
Yes, I am as well. All right, guys, but one that we're all looking forward to here on the Auburn pregame show, of course, is the Tigers taking on 17th ranked Arkansas in Fayetteville. Kickoff set for 11 o'clock on CBS. Going to be a good one. Matt and I will join you for the post-game show. Guys, get your coffee. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Auburn pregame show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust.
Medical Properties Trust, at the very heart of healthcare.